In early 1968, as the Vietnam War raged on, a MiG-17 fighter jet was shot down over the A Shau Valley by U.S. aviator Ken Lee while piloting an OV-1 Mohawk. The MiG kill was only one of an estimated 131 shot down in air combat during the conflict. But what made this event so remarkable was the fact that Ken Lee was a U.S. Army captain aboard a U.S. Army aircraft. It was the only instance of an air-to-air kill by the U.S. Army to date since World War II. However, despite the apparent notoriety of the event, the aerial assault violated protocol established under the Key West Agreement. Therefore, the U.S. Army and high-ranking officers went to great lengths to cover it up. Key West Agreement. The Key West Agreement, a guide for armed forces and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was a policy document written by the first U.S. Secretary of Defense, James V. Forrester. This agreement served as an outline for splitting aircraft assets between the Army, Navy, and brand new Air Force. The rules and stipulations set forth continue to dictate U.S. military branches' arsenal to this day. Air support, one of the most valuable combat operations, was entirely under the purview of the Air Force, including airlift, support, resupply, reconnaissance, and engagement. While still providing close air support to the Army, the Air Force's capabilities were no longer accessible to the Army. Even the Navy, primarily tasked with naval combat, nevertheless included amphibious assaults. The Army was now strictly ground forces. Close air support had been traditionally reserved for fixed-wing aircraft. However, as combat has evolved, aircraft roles have changed. Since the Key West Agreement, the Army's fixed-wing aircrafts lessened to some reconnaissance and medical evacuation. The Army's transportation air support and aerial attack capabilities were now relegated to rotary aircraft. American air losses. The Vietnam War saw aircraft on both sides. Air-to-air missiles were widespread between Viet Cong and U.S. forces. Nonetheless, the United States maintained air supremacy. According to the U.S. Air Force, 128 U.S. planes were lost or shot down, while the North Vietnamese lost 266 aircraft. According to Vietnamese calculations, the U.S. lost 195 planes and they lost 131. Regardless, only one Army pilot managed an aerial win. MiG-17. The Mikoyan Guryevich 17, known as the Fresco to NATO, is a subsonic fighter plane manufactured in the USSR and operated by several air forces in a wide array of variants. First developed in 1952, it remixed the MiG-15 with a few modifications. In 1958, the aircraft first saw combat during the Second Strait Crisis in Taiwan. Soon after, it adeptly suited the more modern supersonic American fighters used in the Vietnam War. Although introduced during the Korean War, the Soviet Union started work on the MiG-15's replacement early in 1949. The resulting MiG-17 would be highly effective in the war in the 1960s due to its easy maneuverability at slow speeds for short-range engagements. One of the deficiencies of the MiG-15 was its air brake sensor, which could not be reliably and safely utilized at speeds faster than Mach 0.92. The MiG-17 was explicitly set up to be controllable at higher speeds. The first few models featured the same Klimov VK-1 engine based on the Rolls-Royce Neen's same thrust. Later on, an afterburner was integrated into the aircraft. The airframe was thinner, with a better high-swept wing and a tailplane for speeds nearing Mach 1. Moreover, manufacturers added a third wing fence to each wing as well as a ventral fin. They elongated the fuselage, adding about an additional meter of length. On January 14, 1950, pilot Ivan Ivanchenko conducted the prototype's maiden flight. However, upon further testing, a flutter ripped the horizontal tail off on March 17th. The aircraft spun out and crash-landed. Issues, including lack of wing stiffness, were discovered and fixed. In August 1951, production started and stalled due to an increase of MiG-15 output. It did not enter service until the MiG-19 was almost completed in October 1952. Throughout production, the plane underwent modifications. For example, the original version was an all-purpose day fighter featuring 3 cannons, one 37mm and two 23mm. It doubled as a bomber, but with low payload compared to its peers. At first, the Chinese favored the MiG-17 in Vietnam. In 1960, nearly 50 North Vietnamese airmen were trained by the People's Republic of China to use the MiG-17. 31 of those people were deployed to the VPAF base in Sundong for additional training. By 1962, some pilots were certified to fly the aircraft and return to their respective units. As a way to celebrate, the USSR gifted North Vietnam with 36 fighters and MiG-15 UTI trainers in 1964. Those trained pilots would go on to form North Vietnam's first jet fighter regiment. The MiG-17 was their main interceptor. 3 ace pilots, Nguyen Van Bai, Lu Hui Kao and Lei Hai led the regiment, while the 13 other ace pilots handled MiG-21s. OV-1 Mohawk. On the United States side, the Grumman OV-1 Mohawk served as a military observation and attack plane optimal for surveillance and light strikes. Featuring twin turboprops and 2 seats, the plane was designed to take off from short, rugged runways, supporting the U.S. Army wherever needed. Its development began as a joint Army-Marine effort for a replacement of the Cessna L-9 Bird Dog. In June 1956, the Army issued specification TS-145, requesting a 2-seat turboprop plane to handle all weather conditions and designed to take off and land in makeshift airbases. Compared to the Bird Dog, the Mohawk was faster, better armed, and armored. To support Marines, the plane featured water skis for sea landing. It could carry rockets or bombs, too, so that Marines could provide close air support. The Air Force tried to remove these armament capabilities. When Navy sponsors decided to purchase a fleet of oil tankers, they withdrew from the program. The Army continued with their development. Halfway through 1961, the first combat-ready planes arrived. They entered service in Europe and Vietnam and patrolling Korea's DMZ. Expensive and controversial, the Army's reservations about the Mohawk peaked in 1965, when a directive forbade the Army from using fixed-wing aircraft. In Vietnam, the Army flew operationally. They lost 65 Mohawks to accidents, ground fires, and 1 aerial attack. Ken Lee. The OV-1 Mohawk was ideal for taking off in short distances from austere runways, which made it great for spotting artillery and coordinating close air support. While the Air Force and the North Vietnamese engaged regularly, it was only this aircraft that secured the Army's first air-to-air victory. Army aviator Ken Lee first learned to fly the aircraft in early 1964. After his first tour of Vietnam in September, he returned to U.S. soil in November. Once he departed for his second tour in 1967, he was tasked with reconnaissance missions. He later recalled an injury he endured, saying, quote, "I was wounded October 1st, 1967, at the border between South Vietnam and Laos. A .51 caliber round came through the side skin of the aircraft and went through my flak jacket, damaged my .45 caliber sidearm, through my survival radio and survival kit. I was next in the bullet's path. I was not able to fly again for 3 weeks." Yet he returned to combat duty, and on his second mission, he made history. Guns blazing. Lee and another OV-1 Mohawk were flying over Laos when gunfire suddenly pinged off the airframe. A MiG-17 surpassed the slow plane, taking potshots. Lee recalled the experience later, saying, quote, "When I felt the hits on the aircraft, I told my wingman to break south, as there was no point in both of us getting shot down. I was still a bit jumpy in that area. I didn't want another .51 caliber round in my side, so I started a right turn to put some distance between me and the AAA batteries in the valley. I looked out the right side of the airplane to clear my turn, and then just as I began the turn, the MiG flew past me. I had only 170 knots of airspeed as we were heavy." At the moment, Lee's co-pilot threw up his helmet bag, which contained a new camera and an oxygen mask. Both were ruined. Lee recalled thinking that he had to fight back to keep his accompanying Mohawk safe and to survive himself. He later recalled what he did in response to the MiG-17, quote, "When he passed me, he just about lined himself up. He just happened to be right on my pipper, so I have to say there was no great skill involved in leading him or anything. I just started shooting." As he ferociously shot at the enemy, the MiG caught on fire. The American pilots didn't witness the aircraft hitting the ground. However, it entered a steep valley terrain while ablaze. The incident made Lee the only Army pilot to take down a plane with his own during the Vietnam War. Secrecy and recognition. As he visually examined the 23mm holes made by the MiG, Lee was sworn to secrecy about what transpired. The Army feared that violating the Key West Agreement meant that the Army would lose their OV-1 Mohawk aircraft. Yet 2 celebrated combat aviators from the Air Force heard of his accomplishment and wanted to celebrate, Colonels Robin Olds and Daniel James. Lee recalled the celebration, speaking highly of Olds, quote, "When I met him at the club the next time I went to Ubon, he and Colonel James put me up in the center of a line for a MiG sweep, drinks and food on the house. The MiG sweep was a real thrill. I still think of them both. You would never know that he was a genuine hero. He did not show any weakness in his character, and did not allow you to show any weakness. He brought out your strengths in a way that made you feel you had done it yourself. He was a national hero and treated me, an Army captain, as an equal. I never saw them acting like they were as beat down from flying missions as we were. He did not seem to be too taxed at the time. Always relaxed, no pressure. While the events would be kept secret, the kill was later confirmed internally by the Air Force's ranking officers, while still respecting the secret pact."